Day 18, and we are talking finally about Jesus and his disciples. Now, in the ancient world, it was a significant honor to become a disciple or a student of a well-known master teacher, especially like Jesus. And one of the most notable traits of Jesus's ministry is who he picks as his disciples. It is very unlikely choices for sure. So here is a little about what we know about them. First, most of the disciples actually knew who Jesus was before he called them to become his disciples, and Jesus actually knew them. How? Because a number of them were actually followers of John the Baptist, and trusting and knowing John the Baptist, and of course John eventually telling them Jesus is the one that you should be following, they naturally gravitate towards Jesus, especially, of course, after John the Baptist is arrested and put in prison. And that is when Jesus invites them to follow along with him. Second, a number of the disciples were close friends with each other. At least half of them knew each other very well. So, of course, you have the two sets of brothers, Andrew and Peter, and then James and John, and Philip, who is from Andrew and Peter's hometown, so they know each other. Philip then invites his friend Nathanael to meet Jesus. So there is already established relational connections. And he is asking them to basically follow him together. Leave your father, James and John. And third, we can tell none of the disciples come from a priestly or learned background. They are all working men. Finally, Jesus draws the disciples from a diverse background. You have fishermen. Of course, you have Judas the Zealot. You have Matthew the tax collector. You have these dynamic personalities and backgrounds. And it helps put in the perspective, of course, the start of this chapter. It gives a verse in Luke 6, and it says, Jesus went up to the mountain to pray, and he spent all night in prayer to God. And when day came, he called his disciples and chose 12 of them. Now, of course, there were much more than 12 there present. He just calls 12 specifically to be named his disciples, those that would be seen as carrying on the ministry and the teachings of Jesus himself. They would be the multipliers. Now we know why he spent all night in prayer, because he's got this ragtag group, which is pretty famous for being followers of a well-known master teacher like Jesus. And he goes on to relate a story about him nicknaming someone in his own life, and how when you give a nickname to people, it is a sign that you love them. It's a sign that you care about them. It's a sign that you genuinely appreciate them. And there's a banter back and forth that a nickname gives. And of course, we see that in Peter being named the Rock, and James and John being named the Sons of Thunder. And he goes on to say, surely some of the others had nicknames as well, and they probably had a nickname for Jesus too. We would certainly wonder what that nickname would be for the disciples calling Jesus something. But the familiarity is what's important, the sense of brotherhood, the closeness, and that is what we look for in our relationship as well. Not a formal setting of just approaching the throne, but of the ability to say, hey, I called you Big Daddy, and that's truly being able to say relationship from a loving, close relationship.